Hey everyone, it's James here from GoodGuitarist.com, and today I want to share with you my tips for older beginners and some exercises that you can do to incorporate all of this into your routine. Right before COVID hit, 90% of my students were 40 and older. My oldest student was 78, and I didn't decide that. Things just went that way. I think it's also because I learned a little later in life. Since I've gone through every step of the learning process as a conscious adult, I remember everything that I did to go from absolutely nothing to where I am today, and I would like to share some of that with you. If you would like a printable worksheet for this lesson to help you incorporate these tips and exercises into your routine, that'll be available on my Patreon page. There's a link for that down below. Also below, you'll find a link to my 100% free ebook that contains all the basics of chords and strumming. Either way, let's get started with tip number 1. Warming up. And that's pretty obvious, but it definitely needs to make this list. I find that even for myself, I'm 34 years old, I need to warm up or else things just don't feel right. When I pick up my guitar, I never feel as great as I did at the end of my last practice session. You always have to do a little bit of warm up to kind of get things going. And if you're in the earlier phases, a really good warm up is silent switching. That's where you start with one chord shape. Here I have a G, and then you switch to, say, a D chord. And you just do it silently. You focus on where your fingers are placed, how your arm feels. Since we're not strumming or anything, we can focus on all those little details, where our thumb is, where our fingertips lie. We just silently switch. And for your strumming arm, a good warm-up is just on muted strings. Just move your arm down and up and just count. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and whatever you're working on, have some simple version of it or break it down and warm up with that a little bit before you really start to, try to put the chords and the strumming together or whatever it is that you're working on. My second tip is to simplify the learning process. And that's exactly what I do in all my song tutorials. It's not just, here's the shapes, here's the pattern, let's try the whole song. We break it down into smaller steps. First, we silently switch through the shapes. We do it with downstrokes only, just so we can, get the chord order without worrying about the rhythm. Then we learn our pattern, we break it down into halves, put it together, try it over each chord shape. And then you can start to put the chords and the strumming pattern together over one section of the song, and then you repeat that for the next section of the song. The whole point is that instead of just, here's the chords, here's the strumming pattern, here's the song, we broke it down into like 7 or 8 little steps, and you can do each one of those steps, and you practice them all individually, and then when you go to put it together, it'll be so much simpler. My third tip is to go at your own pace and make your practice count. Don't just run for the finish line and haphazardly make your way through some chord shapes. We're not in a rush. You go at your own pace. You take your time. Let's say you're learning a song that has G, D, and C in it. So all the parts of the song where you're going from G to D are working out perfectly. But let's say that C chord is coming up and your switch from G to C is so-so. And rather than play the whole song and slow down for the G to C part, rather than doing that, it feels kind of weird when the song just suddenly slows down and stops. You're better off really concentrating on that switch from G to C and thinking about the motion. Come up with a plan of action, like write down which fingers you're going to move first. Maybe you're going to put your first finger down, then your middle, then your ring. Write that out, plan it out, silently switch for like 5 minutes, just going 1, 2, 3, back to G, 1, and just doing it that way. And that's going to be better than trying to play through that G to C part at full speed and just hoping that it works out. Tip number 4 is it's better to practice for a short period of time, many times throughout the week, than having one big practice session. The way that our human attention span works, we kind of tune out after a while. It's different for everybody, but when you're getting started, your brain is working extra hard, and the amount of good, efficient practice that you can do in one session, it's not very long, maybe 10 or 15 minutes. As you play more and more, you will be able to focus for longer, but when you're getting started, I recommend practicing about 15 minutes a day, 5 or 6 days of the week. You could do half an hour a day, maybe even a bit more, but the whole point is that you're doing a session every single day. And if you want faster results, you can practice multiple times throughout the day, maybe 10 or 15 minutes before lunch and another 10 or 15 minutes in the evening, and you do it every single day, and that'll add up fast. I log my practice and I write down what I'm working on, and that way I can quickly look back and see where I left off, and I recommend this to all my students. I just write down that I worked on switching between these two chords, or I worked on picking this or that, and that way next time I go to practice, I can just see, oh yeah, that's what I was working on, and just pick up right where I left off. Tip number 5 is to leave your guitar out so you can practice as soon as you feel the urge. If your guitar is in the case, it's just one more thing to do before you can sit down with your guitar. We're strange creatures. Sometimes the smallest obstacles can stop us in our tracks. I'll get the urge to play some guitar, but then I see that it's still in the gig bag, and that's one extra step that I don't feel like doing, and I'll keep sitting around, poking around on my phone. And then I force myself to pick up my guitar, and bam, suddenly I'm super into it, and a whole hour flies by. So it's just about having it there ready for you so that you can just go grab it and get down to it when you feel like it. Tip number 6 is to use a light string gauge or even play an electric guitar. Lighter strings are way easier to press, and this isn't giving up or being weak. Lots of very famous guitar players like Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin, Eric Clapton, B.B. King, Mark Knopfler, they all use light or extra light strings, and nobody makes fun of them. If you play acoustic, go with extra light. You could even try an electric guitar, which is going to be easier to play in every single way. It has a slimmer neck, lighter strings. It's so much easier to press them down. And this isn't a crutch. I actually prefer the sound of light strings when I'm recording through certain amps. It's just a decision that you make. People really started going for heavier string gauges in the 90s, in the grunge era. But if you just look online, like what all these classic rock players used on their acoustic and their electric guitars, and it was all pretty light. So, that's another huge tip. That makes playing guitar so much easier. Now, my 7th and final tip is that finger pain goes away. Finger pads feel better fast. It always goes away, usually within a couple weeks. I've had some people tell me that it took 2 months to go away, but it still went away. You need to play till it's a little uncomfortable, then you give them a chance to feel better, and then you just repeat that process over and over again. If you want to speed up the process, you can press your thumbnail into your finger pads just throughout the day, just to get them used to the pressure. So those are my 7 tips and exercises for starting guitar later in life. And before I go, I'd like to share a little bit about myself and my journey. I also started guitar as a young adult. I was 17, and looking back, that's quite young, but at that time, I felt like I was way behind all my friends. They started like a decade before, and I had no other instrument, no background in music. I didn't even really listen to much music until then. That's when I really started getting into it. And I was able to go from literally just starting guitar, and within 3 years, I was playing in bands, playing gigs. I got accepted into music school, and I graduated. I did everything that I needed to do. I caught up completely. And the reason why I was able to do that is because whenever I approached a problem, something that I couldn't play or couldn't do, I broke it down into steps. I simplified it, broke those steps down into even smaller steps, and I would just focus on one thing at a time. You can always break things down into smaller and smaller pieces until there's something that you can accomplish. And when you add those steps back up together, they end up creating something much bigger. And if you're interested in learning that way, I've taken my entire method that can turn anyone into a confident strummer, and I've put it into a simple step-by-step course. It's my complete beginner's course. It goes over everything in the simplest way possible, starting at a way earlier point than any other course I've seen. If everybody else starts at level 1, my course starts at level 0, and it builds up on that one step at a time until you're able to play along with your favorite tunes. There's a link down below if you'd like more information about that. Otherwise, don't forget to download my free ebook. The worksheet for this lesson is available on my Patreon. There's links down below for all that stuff. Otherwise, have a fun time practicing, and I'll see you soon.